So anyone with a knee saver, I hate you. I really do. Hi, I'm Andy.
And I'm Roger,
And welcome to The Middle,
where we try to have thoughtful conversations
about awkward topics.
On our search to find the middle.
We're going to give you last week's news today.
It's a slogan we should put on a t-shirt.
Stop touching her!
I am tonight announcing my candidacy.
Taylor Swift. Look, my biggest issue with marriage is that I think that it's a fundamentally flawed institution that is built on the oppression of women.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny.
Having truly rational conversations about controversial issues is risky these days.
Andy, how you doing?
Good evening.
Good evening to yourself. I've got to tell you, actually, I was at the shops today and I had a bit of a first. I was minding my own business, actually getting some things for my daughter's birthday, who's decided to have a theme that is a very obscure Japanese character called Cinema Roll. So I'm searching all these places, I'm finding all this merchandise and decorations for her. And I decide, to actually be healthy, given our weight loss challenges, and I'm eating a chocolate-coated banana from Top Juice, which is a bit of an awkward thing. It's got the curve. It's you're trying your best not to deep throat this thing. Anyway, at this exact moment, I can kind of, how you have that feeling when someone's watching you or someone's kind of like about to approach you in your peripheral vision, right? And I have that sense quite a lot, actually, because I'm a big scanner. I'm not someone who's just buried in their own thoughts. So I kind of feel this presence, and I go on eating my banana, and then I get this kind of like person, this woman that comes really close to me, and I turn around, and I've got the banana in my mouth, and I'm trying not to this is the crucial moment where I'm trying not to break the shard of chocolate, and she goes, "Sorry to bother you, but are you Roger?" I'm just like, "Oh, yes, yeah, I am Roger. Sorry, who are you?" And her name's Linda, so shout out to Linda, and I'm sure you'll be listening even more so now, more regularly than you do already. But Linda, you are our first, well, my first, unless you haven't told me, Andy, real fan encounter in the wild.
Oh, stopped in the street.
Yeah, with the frozen banana. And yeah, she came and she kind of recognized me, which is no small feat because I think that, we don't really advertise our likeness that much, and she obviously must have seen us on Instagram, and she's a fan. She told me that her and her partner listened to it together, actually, which is quite cool.
Oh, good. Well, I'll update our listener stats then.
Yeah, I'm like maybe there's families listening all together, churches listening all together, and actually that's the reason why we don't have the numbers that we thought. But funnily enough, so she actually said that she's a fan. And she said it was really funny, though, because obviously doing this podcast, it's something personal for us. But she was like, I feel like I'm, like seeing a celebrity kind of thing. And, because she's used to hearing us on over the airwaves. And she said to me that there was a problem, though. They had listened to the Voice episode at the time with her partner, and they listened to it together, like through the speaker. And it said it generated a post-game discussion that ended up in a fight, and they didn't speak to each other for almost 24 hours after that episode. Destroying
one marriage at a time.
And I said, well, if you don't mind me asking, which way did you vote in the end? And she said, I was a no vote, and that was because of you. And I thought to myself, oh, shit. Because, Ruben said the same thing, that actually you and I represented the no argument better than he had ever seen in the media. And it got me thinking is actually, oh, well, it's weird because we both voted yes, but we've convinced some people to vote no. And it's like, well, you got to be careful of your words. And it just reinforces my thing that it was a very divisive. I mean, if it's so divisive that you're separating partners listening to a podcast episode on the topic, imagine what it's doing for other people, other people in our community. But yeah, it was a very surreal moment. And shout out to Linda, and thanks for working up the courage to come approach an Asian man eating a banana, chocolate-covered banana. It made my day. And for anyone else out there, look forward to meeting you in the future.
You need to get a piece of Taylor Swift's security to stop all the
stalkers. No, but the funny thing was, right, I don't remember ever disclosing where I lived, but she must have picked it up from something that I lived in the area.
All that anyone needs to know is I live in a big house in the hills. We're a lot of church-going folk, and
Hey, we're not trying to double down on this run into Roger situation.
It doesn't take much to triangulate where you live for anyone who lives in Sydney.
Yeah, but it was she knew, and she was a local as well, and it just didn't cross my mind that there would be other local listeners, but it does make a lot of sense. And I don't know, how would you have reacted, Andy, if one of our fans just approached you out of the blue?
Well, firstly, I think I would share your sense of amazement that well, not only that your likeness from, and I must say the only likeness that we've put out there is our thumbnail for the podcast, and that's not even really us. That's just like some AI generated thing. Just sorry to break the burst the bubble there. We don't actually look quite like that. Especially now that we've lost 10 kilos each, right? But so anyway, no, I think that's cool. That's good. And it's actually just as a different slant on this, you often hear like really quite famous podcasters, like not like if we're at the very, 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 very low end of public exposure, there's people at the let's say the opposite end of the spectrum as us, right? So people who have millions of downloads a week, and they are in many ways more influential than, in terms of exposure, right? They're like exposed to more people than anyone really, like on TV or any kind of mainstream celebrity. But they still talk about, I'm kind of not really famous, but I'm just I'm this like in the middle kind of, I might get recognized, but I'm not really famous. And even like maybe YouTubers is a better example, because it really is about their face, right? So they might have millions and millions of billions of views even, and they'll still talk about, I'm not really famous. I'm just kind of like borderline, and that's really because, when I went to VidCon, in America last year, that was a similar kind of vibe where you had these people who have these really hardcore niche groups that are really into them, who will like treat them like the Beatles, or let's say Taylor Swift, because that's a bit more of a contemporary example. But then no one else, like they could just walk past like everyone else in the convention and they won't know who they are, right? So it's just this kind of the nicheness of like the extreme fandom among a narrow group of a narrow audience, but it's quite intense. But then like there's no broad familiarity.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because it actually just shows you how caught up we are in this old school version or stereotype of what a celebrity is. Like, you have to be on TV, you have to be doing talk show circuits, you have to be a household name. But that's really not the case anymore. Like you said, right? There are people with lots of reach.
So the example I would give is like, I don't know why this name sticks out, but like someone like Frankie J. Holden, right? Mm. Everyone in Australia, and maybe not now, but like 20 years ago or 30 years ago, virtually everyone in Australia would know who Frankie J. Holden is, right? Or he was just one of those figures that was always on TV. He had various kind of hosting gigs. He was, I think, had some acting roles or whatever. He was like just universally, everyone would know him, right? But no one would really be, I can't imagine anyone really being a Frankie J. Holden, like super fan, you know what I mean? Like this is not a guy you'd pull your panties down to get him to sign them, right? This is a fairly sort of ordinary TV guy, right? And I think that's kind of, but yet he's still quite broadly famous, right? But yeah, now I just think even like someone like Mr. Beast could probably, who's like the most famous YouTuber.
I think he's having his crossover actually, because he's the very, very upper end echelon of YouTube fame, and I think he's so famous for being the biggest YouTuber that he's now crossed over. Because even in the Super Bowl, I saw him face to face with a lot of celebrities now.
Perhaps,
which is
but if my parents were sitting in a room next to him, they would have no idea who he is.
Yeah.
So like, there's those kind of, like, so anyway, but anyway, that's a good story.
And you know what was even better? It was like she was it was funny because when I came back and I recounted the story to my family, they were pretty much trying to almost like, they had in their mind what a listener would be.
Triangulate.
They're like, oh, first of all, it was like it was a she, because they thought, we probably just have male listeners. And then they were like, "Oh, she was Asian though, right?" And I'm like, "Why would she be Asian?" And she wasn't. She was Caucasian. Yeah, it's really funny to like hear my family think of who actually listens to us. I'm like, yeah. So in the obviously in the spirit of listener and fan engagement, I think we should keep on going with another listener question.
Oh yes. Okay. All right, so I think it's my turn to ask. So, hey, Andy and Roger, big fan here, even though sometimes I feel you guys are a bit out of my league. Gosh, it's all those flowing locks on our
AI
icons. Generated, yeah. Anyway, I was listening to your episode on cancel culture, and it really got me thinking. I've always seen myself as someone who doesn't really care much about authority or following the crowd. But this whole cancel culture thing seems to have everyone walking on eggshells. My question is, how do you guys navigate this without losing your edge or sounding like you're pandering to one side? I mean, with all these stories about people getting cancelled left and right, it makes me wonder if there's a point to speaking up or if I should just keep my thoughts to myself. What's your take?
So first of all, they didn't leave a name, did they?
Well, there's the name from the email address, but I won't. I'll just protect the
maybe
privacy
not.
just in case. Yeah,
maybe not encourage doxing. Well, first of all, thank you. We're definitely not out of your league, and yeah, in any way, shape, or form. In terms of
Roger will do any banana.
Milk, dark, white, chocolate, all good. In terms of I resonate with what you're saying, because sometimes, and even, we've been, to be totally honest, Andy and I sat down when we were in the planning stages of this podcast, and we kind of almost said, is it worth it, right? Like, is it worth the risk in terms, like the risk reward? And that often looms over the show and what we're doing, right? And there are times where, we'll a certain issue will come up and one of us might have a bit of a problem when we say, well, is it actually worth talking about this, given the risk of what might happen or what could happen, right? Even if it is a small risk, that impact could be really high. So it is there. It's like omnipresent. And it's a terrible thing about the culture that we live in today. At the end of the day, right, like it's about the size of the target that you are as well. And that can come back to haunt you. We made a decision, I suppose, that it's not so much having to go out on a strong position, but it's actually doing the work to get to your position. And I think if you focus on that in like a really genuine and authentic way, then you're going to avoid a lot of the problems about people who come out and just, they're on their soapbox and they're kind of like, they're speaking from a place of authority that that their position is solidified behind thick perspex and glass, and they're never going to change it, and they're right, and they're always going to be right. Like, I think that's not usually where Andy and I play. We're more about actually figuring it out in real time for you to listen to, and I think that's the thing, and that's kind of what is at stake here as a result of cancel culture. And I think that's the part that we're fighting for. It's like, don't take away people's ability to talk it out with someone, to kind of work it out, right? Because that's where the real action happens. That's where the magic happens, right? Like when people are going from a place of being ignorant to exploring issue to get to that position. And so that's what I would kind of say. Like, if you focus on that part rather than, I've got this position and I just want to sing it from the rooftops. Like, I think that it's the latter that will get you in trouble.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem with cancel culture is like, I think that's like a term that's been used to talk about certain kind of notable people who've had their careers kind of shut down because of something that's happened or whatever, something they've said. And I think that that's sort of an extension of like the broader phenomena of, I don't like the term political correctness because it sort of sounds like this right-wing kind of, I can't be racist anymore, this is terrible sort of thing. But let's just, for lack of a better kind of framing, use that as a kind of all the woke thing and all that stuff. I think we've moved to a new world where we're less tolerant of people to say things that are a bit silly and to give them a little bit of slack for having said something that maybe was a bit poorly thought through or maybe not a universally agreed sort of statement. And I think the difference, and that applies to everyone, not just like people who get on their soapbox on a podcast or a TV show or wherever. That can apply to anyone, like in the workplace, especially. So I can like whinge about that as a phenomenon, but I don't think it's unique to just doing something like this. Just in terms of keep speaking up or keeping your thoughts to yourself. And I guess one of the things with this podcast has been like have people you trust and that you have a conversation in good faith, and you know that like, well, I know that Roger, you're not going to pull me up because I've said something in an awkward way and say, oh, you said this thing, how terrible, like I could say something quite offensive to you, but I think you would know that my heart is in the right place, in that I'm not actually trying to be offensive to you, and vice versa. So, and that's what enables two people to have this kind of conversation. But I guess in the context of your personal life, it's
we've had
those people.
We've had a discussion about this before, and I'll just wrap it up by saying that, like, when they talk about having a safe space for something, it's about trust, and you are the only one, Mr. Listener, that can determine whether you have the trust to say the things that you're saying, right? If you have trust in certain group of your colleagues, then you can obviously push the envelope further, right? And I think that really is what's missing in today's like landscape, and especially on social media. There's no trust, and why would there be? There's no one. You don't even know what's going on there. But yeah, look, I sympathize with you too, because really at the end of the day, it is not worth it if your goal is to try to change someone's opinion or to make a difference. You're not really going to do that, but it is worth its weight in gold in protecting your ability to talk things out with people. And having, like, when we stop talking, that's when the bad shit happens. So I think that that's part is worth its weight in gold and valuable. Saying something to try to change your mind or whatever, not so much.
Roger, do you want to take us through what we're doing for today's episode?
Yeah, so we've had a lot of feedback around people enjoying some of the topics that we're discussing on social etiquette, right? And little gray areas in day-to-day lives. And we thought we'd round up a few of these culprits and have a discussion today and essentially have a middle jury, a middle assessment on some of these more gray areas in community or social etiquette, right? And the first one that came across my desk, so to speak, in my local Facebook community page, no less, is a situation of garbage collection, or the bins. So how it went down, and the scenario in mention was that someone posted a picture of their house, and on their green strip next to their driveway, they put out their red and yellow bins for collection just like any other week. And on the photo, there was a car parked directly in front of them. And the caption was, like, how do I handle this situation? Because that car obstructed the bins, my garbage didn't get taken out. The garbage men couldn't access it, and they just left it there. Like, what is the right way to deal with this? And I tried not to get drawn into the comments, but it was a firebrand of like all sorts of different extreme views on other sides. From, you should, if that was me, I'd dump the contents of the bin all over that car, and other people saying that car has the right to park there. You do not own the street in front. How entitled to think that you own the parking spot in front of your house, kind of thing, and everything in between. And people, saying, "Oh, I just put the bins on the road, and it will stop them from doing it." And so it was obviously a very hot topic and a very something that cut close to home. And putting aside the dynamics of these community Facebook groups, where there are power users and people with certain social capital, I'm very interested in your opinion, Andy, around this situation. And the context here is a suburban area. So we're not talking about apartments. We're not talking about, hardcore inner city. It's kind of, a more suburban setting. And yeah, that's the one we'll kick off with.
I must admit, I do find this one a little bit hard to relate to, because I don't think I've ever experienced this before. If it's like a neighbor that gets the deal, like understands, like, it's bin night, this person's put their bin there, and they're like just I don't know, just doing it almost either like negligently or as a power move or something, then yes, it's like it is actually really, really bad. But I would imagine that the person who actually parked in front has no idea of the consequences. Like maybe they didn't even appreciate the bins were there. Maybe they are a bit kind of naive to that actually will impact the collection of the bins. I would give the benefit of the doubt to the person who's parked there, and that if they knew that the consequence of them parking there was that the bins weren't collected, that they would probably be quietly horrified with themselves. If it is like knowingly, like if they had knowledge of, then yes, then that requires like a different level of judgment, right? So if it was the same car every week, I would be putting like a sign on I'd be like putting a note or something on the door saying, "Can you stop bloody doing that?" And I do think as a general principle, yes, of course, like you shouldn't park in front of bins like that are going to be collected the next day. So I do think that as a general proposition, but I'm talking suburban areas, right? Not an area where parking is like really scarce, right? Like this is a city or something.
That's quite an interesting position from you, Andy, because on one hand, you're giving a very, very generous interpretation that an adult wouldn't understand that the bins wouldn't be collected if you park right in front of them, which definitely wasn't the case in this community group. But you're also saying that it wasn't the right thing to do if they knew that.
Yes.
So it's an interesting piece for me. Like where I stand on this issue is that, in a suburban area, it all goes to what you believe your entitlement is of your frontage. Like you said, if even taking the bins out of it, if you believe that spot right outside your driveway and your grass is yours, right? Like, or if not yours by the letter of the law, by the letter of like social contracts, it should be for you to park your car.
I don't think the dispute is about, someone keeps parking in front of my house. I think the dispute is on bin night, someone keeps parking in front of my house and my bins are full as a result.
No, but one leads to the other is what I mean. Like if you start with the position that you think that, then you're going to always be upset by someone parking
But you might even have the view that, well, actually I can park here because there's shade and like, let's say there's a tree there and I like to park in the shade and I'm entitled to park here and that's fine. But that's a separate issue to the bin one, right? So it's a bit like any kind of situation where you might like to kind of do some subtle little nudges to give yourself some sort of additional kind of rights to that space outside your house, but you don't actually have a right to do it. It's the same with that whole like parking situation, right? Like, can you stand there and reserve a park? Well, convention sort of says, no, you can't. And I think it's the same kind of thing, right? Like you can kind of say, like in Ruben's story, you can say, well, yeah, but like we're moving and like we've got a ton of really heavy stuff and this is a good spot for us. Polite society gives the people moving that car space every day of the week, right? But like if one narky person says, I don't care, I want to park here, you kind of have to roll with it, right?
Well, that's actually more to where I thought your position would be, because that's more the entitlement, like legally, right? Like it's not, that's council road, right? Everyone pays their taxes. You've got no more right to that than any other street in the road in the council.
But I just think this is just like about in the context of like making sure you don't park in front of a bin that's already been placed outside on the road. To me, that just comes down to courtesy and like it's got nothing to do with property rights or anything like that.
Because that's my position, right? So my position is that if you willingly did that, that's probably, that's not the right thing to do if you can help it, right? And what I quickly found out, though, was that there were a lot of vocal people on this group that felt completely opposite. They're like, I can park wherever the fuck I want to, okay? And it's your responsibility as a homeowner to move the bins. So you've got a driveway, put them on your driveway.
All right, so let me hit you up with one. This is a completely different one here. I want you to cast your mind to all of the different social settings where there might be some kind of social expectation of a hug, that you hug. Now, this could be like you're with mates, maybe your friend's partner. Like there seems to be it's like a male-female thing, right? It's not like two blokes don't tend to hug each other generally. Two women might do that, but it's usually like a man and a woman, right? So, like, how do we navigate this in this like post Women's World Cup kiss kind of environment we're in, right? Like, so I'll just give my I will never approach for the hug. Like, that's just not in my nature. But I'll always sort of, if I get the signal to do it, like I won't be like, oh, sorry, I don't hug, you know, like I won't play it weird.
The Mr. Bean pushback and handshake.
Yes, but I'll never initiate it. But what is the right approach here? Like, is this something we need to ditch? Is this something we should like actually celebrate? And actually, the one thing I want to say is like, and maybe to touch on, if you can, like the workplace, the hug in the workplace.
Yeah, I think post COVID, it's been a kind of it's kind of been a pressure valve on all that touchy feely business. And I think in a lot of ways we still are recovering from that, like this idea of like fist bumping or using the elbow to awkwardly touch tips, elbows together or whatever. So I do see that a lot more now, which I think has kind of put all this stuff on ice. But I do remember, you know, I think that I'm like you, and I think a lot of men are like this, where it's not like a touchy feely thing, and it's very rare to touch. Like I'll never. And actually, I think of my friendships and things, even growing up, I never used to touch, like I never used to shake hands. You know, a lot of people are big, you know, male to male handshakers. I never did that. You know, I never wanted to, and I kind of just didn't. And I think that there is something that came in the late 90s, this kind of bro culture, this kind of bro homoerotic. It's funny to kind of pretend to kiss, to kind of like, you know, slap each other's butts and sometimes even flick their crotch or whatever, you know, that kind of childish bro humor we had growing up. And I think that really changed the script a little bit. It wasn't like an awkward thing to do that with your close mates from a man to man perspective.
Grabbing the crotch of your close mates. I don't know if I did much.
I just grab the pussy. But no, I do. Don't you remember? Like, I'm not. Don't hang me up to dry here, Andy. Like this kind of like ball flicking and butt slapping and pretending to kiss and things like this was a part of the comedic thing that
I think this
with
was
Will
just
Ferrell.
like no, I think you're conflating memories from your gay sauna experience.
No, this is way before that. They set the stage for that. But yeah, like definitely there's a bro frat culture of like butt slapping and
no, but
and
I'm
kind of
talking like, but I'm not. Talking...
No, I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
All right.
Yeah. So I'm just saying it's more.
You couldn't help yourself but to talk about bro butt slapping.
And I think unlocking that social aspect of bro culture allows, like, you know, you have friends who will be like, oh, bring it in, and they'll want to give you like, they want to kind of like hug / back slap or a hand, almost like you two black guys in Brooklyn, like trying to like, you know, have a handshake. There's definitely I have friends that are like that, right? Like when you see them, they'll have that kind of bring it in kind of vibe, and I know it's like a manly hug, right? It's not like a full open arm, both arms together. It's like a one, you know, you tuck one hand in and you put the one hand over the back and you do a slap and then you break, right? Like there's definitely, I have friends that do that and I know who they are and I know that's what they like to do. It's not a touchy, squeezy hold hug, but it's definitely an embrace. Like it's like we're tighter than the rest of your acquaintances and we're going to come in for a back slap or whatever it is. So I've got friends like that, but on the whole, yeah, not a touchy thing. And I think colleagues, if you're really close to some male to female, they might go in for the cheek kiss or whatever. Like, you know, I see that a lot still. And that's actually quite surprising. But I do see that a lot. But for most cases, it's just the handshake and there's not hug. And in fact, I'm a fan of like a no contact policy, like a zero tolerance policy when it comes to that kind of thing, right?
But
I just think it's not worth it.
Just to be clear though, I think the kind of hug I'm thinking of is like a man and a woman, right? So the one that comes up when you have your friend's partner and you exchange hugs, right? So your friend hugs your partner and you hug your partner's friend. That's that kind of scenario, almost like the kiss on the cheek kind of thing, right?
Yeah. So the etiquette for me on that is, you kind of, you come in, it's not really a hug. It's like you get in the space enough to almost like a slight kind of cheek to cheek thing. But you're not like squeezing. You're not kind of pulling in, right? That's disrespectful in my mind.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, okay. So this along the spectrum, there's like literally we're just going to do the pantomime of a hug here, where we're actually not going to touch, but we're just going to like get in that weird like body position where we're kind of like hugging, but we're not even touching.
Yeah,
So we're
it's like a
being
game of Operation. You don't want to touch that wire. You just want to get close to it.
So it's very sort of quite weird, really. And then there's like the full on hug, right? And I'm not talking anything sexual or anything like that, but it's just like it is a proper hug, right? And I think I don't think it tends to be like that really kind of standoffish sort of no one's touching kind of thing. It tends to be somewhere in between, right? But I think the reason like I really put off this kind of hugging thing is because I just remember from like school, maybe that kind of just finished school around that age kind of thing. I just remember like a couple of people that we were, that I observed who I reckon were getting off on it, right? And they always loved to go in and hug the girl, and they would hug every girl. Like they were just friends. So it was just a friendly hug, like a greeting style hug. But like I felt like they were getting some pleasure out of it, and it just really turned me off.
Yeah, I know a few guys like that, and I'm thinking about school, and 100% it's like a sneak attack, and you can always tell the perverts because it's all about, in my mind, the ratio here is like how aligned the hips are. So someone like what's happening up top is not that important in my mind. It's actually what's happening in the hips, right? So if you're kind of like straddled in, like you're about to dance the lambada with them, and like there's hip to hip kind of like contact going on, that's like pervert zone right there. You're on the bench. Most people, and if you watch a guy's hug, if they ever did, their hips are almost like side on, almost completely side on, like they're about to box each other, like they're in a boxing stance. And I think that's the thing, because they don't want their wieners to touch, right? they don't want any fitting of the puzzle pieces together in any kind of weird way. So I think that's the thing. And I know if you watch those really touchy-feely people, look, I will say just in defense that there are touchy-feely people, like say maybe their love language is like a more touchy-based one, that aren't perverts, but 100% of perverts are touchy-feely people. So read into that what you will.
Yeah. And then in the workplace, like, so I think you definitely have to like not, if you're someone who still goes in for a hug in the workplace or the kiss or whatever, like that's just like.
But dude, don't you think I'm right? Like the kiss is still so widespread even in corporate culture.
No,
like,
no, I've never seen it.
Maybe, well, in my building, and my office is quite conservative, but like the leadership team and all that kind of stuff, it's not like a hug, but they definitely push the chin out and they do like a cheek thing.
Yeah, no, so I don't see that. The only exception would be if it's like, okay, like I'll give you an example where it might happen, like a farewell drinks between colleagues and the final farewell or something, right?
Oh my god, how depressed! You have to be fired before you get the touch.
I do know that your employer hasn't got the best track record when it comes to
that wasn't a kiss on the cheek problem. Let's not conflate.
Well,
the two
I mean,
issues.
culture stems from the top, right?
It starts with the kiss on the cheek, and then next thing you know, a dick pic in the old inbox.
All right. I think you're going to hit me up with another one, aren't you?
Yeah, okay. This might be a quick one. And I think that it's something that Ruben actually brought up with us on his parking spot fiasco. And that is when you're on public transport, and I've just started to go back to the office now. And so I'm kind of being exposed more to trains and things like that and the wonderful world of that. And you see people sometimes sit on the aisle of the train seat. So imagine a 3-person bench. And instead of sitting by the window, they choose to sit on the aisle. And, this is something that Ruben brought up as well. And they may be doing it in the hopes that no one will sit next to them. Or they might just be like, well, I need a quick getaway. I need the aisle seat, right? Because I'm getting off soon or whatever it is. But what's your take on this kind of behavior?
All right. So for anyone who is not familiar with Sydney trains, there is usually the aisle with 2 seats and the aisle with 3 seats. So imagine a little bit like a plane, right? In that you've got one row is like the middle row of a plane tends to be 4 seats or 5 seats or something. And then you've got the 3 seats or 2 seats on the side. So it's a little bit like that. And you do not, under any circumstances, want to be stuck in the middle seat on that batch of 3 seats. You don't want to be stuck in the middle seat for any kind of long or enduring period of time. And arguably, you also don't want to be stuck in the window seat either, because you're kind of like quite trapped in, right? If you need to get out, like you need to get off the train, you need to like, everyone, like the other two people have to actually get up, or even worse, they might make some sort of play such that like they expect you to climb over them, which is like even worse. And that really shits me off. Like when you get some like, usually it's some dainty kind of, I'll not to make it like a gendered thing, but usually it is like, a woman, and they don't want to actually, they just do this like sideways leg move thing, and like it doesn't work. It's like, you got to get up. Sorry, you got to get up. I'm not climbing over you. Anyway,
it was like that a lot in the tennis actually, because we actually went to see the Australian Open, and they have long rows in the arena, and obviously it's a bit of a faux pas to get up, and it depends on the point, and you're meant to be quite respectful. But we had a lot of that where certain people wouldn't really want to get up and step back. They wanted you to kind of like shuffle with their legs still there. Maybe they put them to the side a little bit, but ultimately you'd be brushing up against them.
Yeah. So anyway, to bring it back to the actual question, in that setting, like I think there's a very plausible reason why people would want to sit on the aisle seat, right? And that's quite a legitimate thing, I think, to be doing. And I think it probably also has the side benefit of discouraging people to sit there. So the incentives are all there for someone to sit on the aisle, right? And you can kind of get away with it. Like it's socially acceptable, I think, to do that, even though it might be a little bit sort of, there might be different motives at play. Personally, I catch the train from the city to the suburbs, ironically, in the morning. And like I kind of go to the city, so I'm kind of like going against the flow. So I don't tend to have these problems. But the one that I do is I like to sit on the, I've got like a very specific seat. Like I can actually choose the seat that I want, because like it's usually an empty carriage, but I've got a very specific seat that I want to sit on. And it's like the one that's just like a single seat, because like then I don't have these problems of sitting next to each other. But I don't just want like the single seat. I want like the other single seat, and like I flip the thing over. So in Sydney, we've got these, you can flip the seats over. And I want it so it's like I've got the seat opposite me as well, so I can put my bag there and stuff. So I've got this like little kind of desk office situation going on.
Bags, are not for seats. Haven't you heard the announcement over the the PA?
I definitely ignore that. Yeah, but I go in and as soon as I see someone's like sitting in either one of my two seats, I'm like, oh, how dare they? But yeah, anyway, so I think it's kind of plausible. I think it kind of, you can get away with it in Sydney.
Yeah, so I mean, on that episode with Ruben, I was, you might think that I'm against it, but I was more using that as an example that he's doing it in hopes that it will deter people from sitting, and that's why, relating to his parking spot example, he's a bad boy. So I think that there's, a selfish thought, or, you're not doing it out of the goodness of your heart and moving, and, I think you are being selfish, but that's potentially okay. You're within your rights to. When it comes to sitting on the aisle, I'm totally okay with that if that person gets up and lets you in a quick and efficient manner. Now, I think that it makes sense from what I've seen on most trains. The closer you get to the city, every seat's going to be full anyway. So why are you putting yourself through this up and down, stand up, hope no one's going to... When it really gets packed, you're going to have no choice. Like everyone's going to sit there. They don't care, right? So to me, it's not an amazing strategy always, but I've got nothing against it.
So next one is one we also mentioned on our episode with Ruben on his car park situation. The airline seat, recline.
Oh, yeah.
Yay or nay?
Ooh. So I feel differently about this because I am affected by my own personal circumstance, like everyone is. And we've spoken about this before. I am someone of a leaner frame, and I'm kind of take up less space than the bigger end of town, let's just say. So I kind of do feel that while it is your right to recline your seat, and while it is my right, it is kind of, just this unspoken thing that you have to kind of understand your impact on people, right? Like just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And the times you shouldn't do something, I personally believe, are through a really short domestic flight. like a Sydney to Melbourne that's only an hour long, I think, you can survive. You can survive, right? You can just kind of sleep upright or whatever you need to do. And the second is, if you can tell that there is an absolute, if I can tell behind me there's an absolute unit, like a Tongan gentleman that's like spilling out of his seat, I'm not going to make his life even worse by jacking my seat back, so that his tray is like in his nostrils. And I think that that's just a common courtesy. Do I have the right to do it? Yeah, I can do it if I want to. But those are my things about just being a decent. Flying is already stressful enough for people. Why make it worse? Why? And it actually makes me feel really sad that they have to sell those seat lockers or knee savers that they clamp from the back. Because I got into an argument about this many years ago with a colleague, and he wasn't even he was my height and he was my build, and he was just saying, look, he didn't even need the space, and he said, look, I always fly with what they call a knee saver, which is where you clamp the seat in front of you so that they can't recline. And usually what happens is they try a few times and they just think, oh, the seat must be broken, and they give up. Every now and then they don't, and it causes a scene and a confrontation, and you hear about them on the news sometimes. But he always flies with one, and he says that 9 out of 10 times it works. And he's only ever had to take it off once.
See, you've brought in an X factor here. I think guy with a knee saver, bad. Really bad.
How is it any different from the deterrent factor that we've been discussing as a grey area? It's a deterrent.
No, I think it's bad.
And if someone asks, they'll take it off. If you ask,
no. See, I think I don't think you have the right to interfere with the. Like you're completely misleading the person into thinking they can't recline because it's broken or something, right? There's something out of everyone's control. But this is like, and so they might just be like, because they're a good person, might just, I'm not going to make a big fuss about it. And meanwhile, this fucker with his knee savers, like taking away like the legitimate right for that person to recline. Now, I will second your comments that you made around like short haul flights, but then on the other hand, you might say, yeah, but like it's only an hour, so what's the big deal or whatever. I do think you have a right. So like if the chairlift, so this is my view, if you can do it, if you can press that button and it reclines and the button is on your side of the seat and it's not on the other person's side, it's on your side, then it's part of the shtick, right? You can do it. It's your right to do it. Now, there are some examples that you gave around like when you might just be a good human being and not do it, like meal service or certainly not in the middle of meal service, given that, the tray rests on the back of the seat, which you then go and recline. But even then, like, there's no rule that you can't do it. It's just like what would be a polite kind of thing to do. But, I find that, just as an aside, no one ever asks me or tells me that they're about to recline their seat when they do it to me. And I don't think it's a thing. I don't think it's the thing that you tell the person behind you you're going to recline. Like that's not my experience on planes, right, in general. So I don't know that there is a culture of like, and in some ways, like they're like, it can be better just not to make eye contact, or just like there's a bit of a buffer zone kind of thing. And when I recline on a plane, it's actually usually because the person in front of me has reclined. So it's like, well, okay, now I need some more space because this person's reclined. So I'm usually not a first mover, but yeah, that knee saver thing, that's I'm dead against that.
You've obviously never experienced that situation where someone's used a knee saver against you?
If someone has a knee saver on a long haul flight, I think that's egregious. I think that's like deplorable. Look, if it's like a knee saver on a 50-minute flight to the Gold Coast, like, well, for one, you probably don't need it anyway. But if you're bringing a knee saver on the bloody long haul flight, Sydney to London or something, you gotta have a look at how selfish you are in the mirror. Like, come on, like, how selfish are you if you're going to do that?
All right. Does it make a difference whether that person that has the knee saver also doesn't recline?
No. No.
Well, there you go.
So anyone with a knee saver, I hate you. I really do.
I'm sympathetic to the situation, but ultimately, of course, the knee saver is not. It's not a good thing. It's bordering on some, I wouldn't say unlawful activity, but it's kind of heading into that direction. You're tampering with someone else's seat, and it's just not a line you should really cross, in my opinion, right? Like, and it's also, you know, if it's really a problem for you, you might have a word to them, rather than just doing this anonymous clamp onto their seat. And you never know, right? Like, actually, there's a reason why these things are not good as well, because does it compromise the seat safety in some manner, or your safety if there's a crash? Like, some of the seat savers, knee savers that I've seen look like G clamps. And if you're in a crash and your head somehow contacts that, you're going to be fucked. So yeah, I don't think it's and I don't think they're widespread really. But like I said, I did work with someone who always used it, and he swore by it.
Roger, I don't know if I should ask you this question, but kids, right? From time to time, kids can get in the way, right? We know this. This is a truth of parenthood, right?
Yeah.
There might be things that you want to go and do, but you can't. But the question is, should kids, or is it reasonable for kids that aren't your own to inconvenience you? So let's give a concrete example. And I want to give like the hypothetical flip side argument to a case study we had a couple of episodes ago, which was the going out with Teacher Will and I'm not really up to going out tonight. I might just have an early night or whatever. And then we were kind of like, oh, come on, like we just arranged our lives so we could go out. Can we figure something out? So I want to give like the other side, right? Maybe the Teacher Will, like advocate for the Teacher Will perspective, which is, hey, I don't care if you've got kids. I'm fucking tired. I just want to go to bed early. That's my prerogative. I don't have kids. I don't get the benefit of kids. I shouldn't get the costs of having kids. So what do you think about that?
Yeah. Look, at the end of the day, you have to, it's about empathy, right? And I think that if you're on the side that has the kids, right, and you're expecting some kind of consideration or special treatment because of that, you do have to always start from a place of understanding what the other person goes through. And, he's right that no one's asked you to have kids. It's not their problem. It really isn't, And if you are expecting special treatment constantly because you have kids, then that's the wrong starting place. Now, that's a starting place, but I do believe that kids as a general proposition in like a society are the most important thing, right? And as a result, there should be a bit of a contract amongst people in that community that you are dealing with what the future will be, right? Like, you are a part of that, and you have a part, depending on who you are, and small or large, on how the future of your community, your society will be, right? And like, it is actually that profound in a lot of ways. Like, what's happening to the generation of kids now will determine like what the future will be. Like, make no mistake. And I know it's a cliche, but it's true, right? So if you think in a way, well, that doesn't concern me, I'll be dead by then, I don't have anyone to, like, that's not someone that I respect, right? If you're just purely about that, like you're just some autonomon that kind of thinks of your own hedonistic pleasure, right? Like, that's a separate issue. So I think it's those things for me that need to be balanced, but you have to start from a place of, if people give you that special treatment, hooray, that's really good for you, but don't expect it. And I think it's that kind of expectation moves into like entitlement that really rubs single people the wrong way, right? It's kind of like if they do, they should be heavily rewarded for it, in the kind of like the niceties and the reciprocation. It shouldn't be expected, right? There's got to be the dance. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe probably the most concrete area where this comes to the fore is like in the workplace. I mean, which is actually a lot of our things we've talked about have like a workplace connection, but like parents with caring responsibilities tend to get like a better deal in the workplace, right? And that stems from variations of maternity or paternity leave where it can be paid, which people who don't have kids don't get. But to be fair, they're also not having kids at the same time that it's for.
And they got more time to invest in their careers.
Yeah, but nonetheless, like that's not like, in some ways you might argue that that's a cross subsidy, right? You could say that people who don't have kids effectively cop lower wages because they're, the costs become higher for employers because they have to factor in the some percentage chance that someone's going to fall pregnant or they're going to take maternity or paternity leave or whatever. So that argument could be made, which leaves them worse off. You might have circumstances of like caring responsibilities if the children are sick, so carers leave or whatever. So, and just generally, I think, in the workplace, they parents get away with a little bit more. So, for example, if you're not at work exactly at 9 o'clock, or you're having to leave a little bit earlier to do the school run or whatever, like you probably get a little bit more flexibility, whether it's an explicit or an implicit thing, or it's just a cultural thing or whatever. So that's probably where it can come through.
Yeah. From an economic point of view, but I actually think the most community-focused way this comes across is actually traveling with kids or kids behaving at a cafe, because I think that's actually the more egregious example of when it goes bad. And the classic example goes back to the plane. See how much shitty things happen on planes? It's like you're traveling with young children. They are going to inconvenience your fellow passengers. Now, what is the expected tolerance for this, right? And I think a really good scenario to examine is a crying baby, right? If you have a crying child on an airplane, they get to the stage where like they are inconveniencing other passengers in a really, really visceral way. Like some people cannot stand the sound of a kid crying. It is stressful. It's made to be stressful from a biological perspective, right? But sometimes, there's not much that can be done. And I've been in this situation traveling with our daughter, on to Europe, right? And you just have to, there are little things like, what's the expectation on you? Obviously, you want to be trying to do things to pacify your child, but what's enough to satisfy your fellow passengers, right? Like, and I think that's something that comes up too. Like, or if your kids are running wild in a cafe and like hitting shit over and stuff, it's like, how much are the parents doing? Because they're a very wide spectrum of corrective activity. Like some parents don't do anything. They're like, they're kids, they're part of nature. It's like they're wild, deal with it. And other parents that are like on them like a hawk, right? And I think that people expect certain things that they would be satisfied that this is happening, right?
Do you think there's a new parent who came out after having kids or kid thinking, actually, it was easier than I thought it would be?
Yeah, I do think there would be someone like that. And I mean, I have met people, and whether it's an act or it's genuine, they've, they say everything is amazing.
Yeah,
right?
but
like,
no, but I'm not talking about like, oh, it's wonderful, I love being a parent. I mean, like, everyone was telling me how hard it was, and actually I had a good sense of how hard it was, and actually it's easier than what everyone said, as opposed to everyone told me how fucking hard it was, and it was fucking 10 times harder than that.
I haven't met a single person who hasn't said it was way harder than they thought. All right, like I haven't met.
Well, that's what I mean.
Person.
Like,
I'm sure there are like people who have help, or their kids go to boarding school or whatever it is, or they don't really raise their kids.
Because this is the dynamic, right? We're talking about people who don't have kids and their sense of what it's like to have kids, and they probably just see the bits that they see.
Yeah,
but they don't know about all the other shit, right?
It's even friends, like,
literally speaking.
In the early days when you have friends over and somehow your kid magically gaslights you and is an angel for that short, period or, hour or two at the cafe, and it totally invalidates all of the pain that you've been going through, because people look at you, your friends like, oh, he's such a well-behaved kid, and aren't you so lucky? And you're sitting there going, oh, fuck.
But also you configure your life for that moment to make that happen. So they don't see everything you had to do to make that happen, right?
Yeah. In fact, the people that are the most inflexible and uptight are doing that because they're trying to avoid subjecting you to the meltdown, right? They're trying to avoid being that person with the screaming child at the cafe. There are moments where I feel inconvenienced by other kids, right? Like, it's natural. And I have to remind myself sometimes, like, oh yeah, I've got kids too, right? Like if I'm by myself, and that's okay. Like, at heart, we're all selfish creatures, and we're always working against that. Like, I think that's the thing to remind yourself too, in terms of empathy, that people don't owe you anything. It's nice that they do, but they don't.
I just want to finish with one final comment in defense of kids. My son, he's older, so he's not. I think I've like wiped quite a few of my toddler, infant, sort of younger memories away. But we're at the phase of like he's having play dates, he's having kids over, and stuff like that. I'm always like very impressed with how polite, how respectful, how well behaved like the friends are when they come over.
Yeah.
And they're not rat bags, you know what I mean? Like they really are good kids, and they're well now. And I don't think it's that they've just been well brought up or anything like that. I think the natural inclination of kids is generally to do the right thing. And that comes with a little bit of maturity, because like we're talking about 11 and 12-year-old sort of age, 10, 11, 12, that kind of age. So we're not talking about like ratty kids on a plane, right? But at the same time, like I think there's so much bad kind of heat about like disrespectful youth and young kids, and they're off on like, yes, they'll talk smack to one another on behind the scenes, and they'll sound like really rude kind of kids or whatever. But then when like they are quite still very respectful of adults and stuff like that. So that's my my final comment in defense of kids.
Let's do one from that I think that we have a little bit of background on, and it's not specifically mansplaining or anything like that, but it's about talking over people in meetings and other kind of group settings, right? Now, it's something that on the surface you would just say, no, you just never talk over someone, right? Like you don't do that. But the problem is, conversations are dynamic, and there are different reasons why you may feel the need to talk over someone. And I think that, reflecting even on this podcast, there are times where we've had guests on where we've kind of been forced to do a version of that, right? But I'm keen on your thoughts. You can take it in the workplace setting. You can throw in the gender thing, however you want to attack it.
So I think in the workplace setting, there's a different dynamic, because sometimes there's like, because you have different people in the room, potentially, it depends on the setting, but you're trying to get different messages across, or you're trying to even get different outcomes out of the meeting. And then people don't always have the same goals. That at times it's not just about being polite and everyone having their say. Sometimes it's about stopping the meeting from going into a direction that's going to be completely not fruitful to the interests of either yourself or the people you're representing. Maybe preventing silly ideas or like rabbit warrens that aren't going to lead anywhere, and kind of making an early intervention so that we don't spend the next half an hour talking about this thing and then realize that it's like we just wasted the last 20 minutes talking about this thing.
Yeah.
And I guess the other factor here is you do have like, in like a let's say business meeting, whether overtly or not, whether explicitly or not, you do tend to have also hierarchies in meetings. So you have people who are kind of more senior, less senior, and everyone, like, even if that's not necessarily like transparent, people are kind of obeying it sort of as well. So I think the risk is like if you're in a meeting and genuinely the purpose of the meeting is to solicit views from as many different people as possible, then I guess that's where it becomes problematic. But sometimes you've got to shut down ideas, and you've got to shut down people who are talking shit, right? And I in those situations, like, absolutely, like, shut them down, like, get them off the stage.
All right, take me to the. I agree with you. The only other thing I'd throw in there is that 100% it is used around power playing as well, and you can see that in debates. Sometimes there's a situation where your opponent, or let's just say it's become that way, your adversary in a certain debate, keeps on talking. They keep on talking and they do not let you respond. And you've got no choice but to try to keep on talking and hope that they will stop so that the rest of the room can hear you. And it's something that you see in debates, political debates and stuff all the time, because you've got no choice at some point where you just have to keep on talking. And that is very stressful for everyone in the room, but sometimes it does get to that. And then, that's the workplace setting. And before we move into social settings, I do want to talk about the gender issue, because it has come up on this podcast, especially when we had Natalia here and other times, that women definitely feel, and I mean, I don't know how they got the stat, but apparently they are cut off more or spoken over more in meetings in the workplace, right? So like, do you find yourself having a second little spidey sense to make sure you don't do that now? Or is it something that you just sort of like, look, Martin Luther King, baby, we're all colorblind, we're all gender blind, let's just treat everyone as equals?
I think if that kind of stuff happens, it's a lot more subtle than just like a bloke not giving a woman a chance to speak, right? I think it's also the whole dynamics of the room, right? It could be maybe more social costs to a woman if she does speak up and appear aggressive in some way. And actually, what might be perceived as a social cost for a woman if she does that might even be that's a strong man, a strong leader, if it's a man doing it, right? So I think it's some of that kind of stuff rather than just this. Like, I think it would probably be very naive if the takeout was that like men just need to do better in meetings, right? Because I think that's part of it, but it's not all of it. And because I've got to say, like, I've been in meetings where I've been very, very fearful of the women on the other side, right? So to me, I don't necessarily see it purely through this like men don't respect women kind of lens, right? Or at least that's not my experience, and it might not. I'm sure there's plenty of blokes who don't respect women, and it doesn't matter the fact that they're a woman, they won't take them seriously or something. I'm sure that does happen, but at least I don't. My experience isn't that like I automatically. I'm like emboldened because I've got women that I'm agitating against them and that I can walk all over them because they're women. That's not my experience. Like, my experience is actually it can be, I don't actually notice a difference, if I'm honest. Like, if they've got good points to raise, like for me, if I'm confident in a meeting to then go and interrupt and talk over someone, it's because I know that I'm really solid in my position and what I'm saying, right? It's got nothing to do with the gender of the other person or who they are or anything like that. It's got to do with my confidence in my position that ultimately there's nothing they can say that I can't respond with to make myself still seem like the right person in the room, right? Sort of thing.
Spoken like a true white male, Andy. It's not interrupting people, it's just my position has more value.
So what Roger, you meant to say there?
No, I think this is actually again talking about like the corporate settings and stuff like that I've been privy to, and I've worked for more female leaders than men in my career, so I know exactly what you mean about being on the other side of it. But I think that when you have this idea of disadvantage and victimhood always hanging over you in the back of your mind, you look out for it more and you start to tally it up more. And it's just a dangerous calculus to start playing in your head, right? Because like you said, there are many reasons for why people talk over other people in a dynamic setting, in a meeting setting or whatever it is, right? And it's a bit of a jungle, like a schoolyard jungle there. There's hierarchy, there's all sorts of things going on. And I think if you are someone who is secretly tallying, that the men in here are not being interrupted, but then the women interrupted, 1.5 times, and that averages out to 2 times per session. And like, if you're stuck in that mentality, then you're going to be looking for those instances, and it's not going to be very good for you, for your mental health, right? And regardless if there is an imbalance in your organization. Now, I'm not saying that on whole, on average, like I'm sure there are many workplaces that have this issue, right? But the ones that I've seen in kind of like white-collared corporate jobs, in major cities, is definitely not what I've seen, right? And I think that people are walking on eggshells now, but not for the right reasons. And I guess that's all I'll say on the matter.
Yeah, well, I think a really unproductive meeting is one where you take a democratic approach to everyone in the room gets heard equally because we need to be fair, as opposed to let's let like the brightest ideas shine and the communicators of the best ideas to shine through. Like that's that's efficient. That's what generates like a productive workplace. And I think there is, but like, see, I think corporate culture is, well, business culture, organization culture, workplace culture maybe is the word, does like the hierarchical nature of workplaces does establish this sort of terms of engagement, right? It says if you're the most junior person in the room, that you're the most inexperienced person in the room, and you know the least, and you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, you be quiet in meetings.
Andy,
and that's how
do
it
you know?
works.
Do you know who gives absolutely zero fucks about that situation? Gen Y and Gen Zs. Like, they do not care about your hierarchy, as evident by the, if you were ever, and I've done a lot of facilitating in my career, these kind of large workshops, which try to flatten the structure and encourage participation from people who maybe not normally give it for those reasons on hierarchy. And I can tell you, they do not care. and I think that's where that is changing, that they don't respect hierarchy in the way that maybe we saw in our earlier careers, or maybe even still see now.
I mean, maybe it's just the culture of the places I've worked, but I've not necessarily seen that myself. But I mean, I don't doubt that it's a thing though. But I actually sometimes find the opposite, in that I do want maybe the more junior people in the room to actually feel like they have a voice and to feel like they can contribute to the meeting. And I just wonder, is that because I'm not giving space for others to contribute, or is it because they're just happy to leave it to me to do the talking, or what's the deal?
It's because you didn't hug your colleagues. That's probably why.
No, but the thing is, like, I actually I don't want to be the only one speaking. Like, even if it's just not to give off the impression that I'm the only one speaking. Like, what have I got? What do I have to do? What's the thing I'm missing? Because I'm sure it's my fault.
Let me tell you about something about all my years of facilitation, doing big workshops with over 50 people in them, right? What you're taught as a facilitator, and a lot of these like human-centered collaborators and stuff like that, is that the wisdom of the mob and collaborative effort and decision by committee is always superior to just a few people working out in the ivory tower, right? And you have mass ideation, and you have voting on things, and everyone comes up and puts their sticker on things and stuff like that. And let me tell you, while that is the line that you're fed, it's complete bullshit. It's like absolutely taking, just even like, I'm not talking taking people off the road, but people that are specialists in their fields and forcing them into an artificial environment where they've got, a 5-minute clock where they have to write as many post-its as they can and force themselves to ideate. The kind of shit that comes out of these people's mouths, utterly useless. There are some people that are good in that setting, and there's some people that literally are like deers in the headlight and won't give you anything, even if you interrogate them with a white lamp, halogen lamp in their eyes. I do not believe in that forced group hothouse thinking that has been such, a pervasive part of corporate culture in the last kind of 5-10 years.
But let's be honest, those sessions and those planning day kind of things are almost universally not about actually like deriving wisdom from like the crowd, right? Aren't they like almost universally like, we already have a strategy. We want to like spoon feed them so that they think that they develop the strategy that we're going to implement anyway, and that they think we're listening to them and that they own the strategy even though they don't actually.
Can't argue with that. Will I get in trouble for telling that Indigenous woman story?
Just don't add